Well, I'm Allie,
And I'm Melissa.
and this is Liverpool, USA. We're best friends, and this is a best friends podcast.
Yes, it is.
And maybe my voice sounds sick, and maybe we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, tis the season.
Yep. Today we're talking about writing inspiration. Um, we are both writers in our various ways. And so we thought we'd talk a little bit about writing and talk a little bit about what inspires us to write. Um, in this episode.
Yeah, and I think both of us have been experiencing a lack of inspiration to say, so it would be really good
Yes.
for us to have you know, kind of a conversation that hopefully is inspiring, talking about the things that inspire us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, maybe it's just the time of year, but I definitely have been in a little bit of a writing rut. And yeah, I think talking about our inspirations will remind me of some of my inspirations and get me back into the writing game. So we've said that we're both writers, and I want to talk a little bit about what type of writing we do or are trying to do when we talk about having inspiration to write. So what is that for you?
Yeah, for me, my favorite types of writing to practice is poetry, and really that like all types of poetry, from like lyrics to, sonnets or whatever, just like all types of poetry. Journalism, I do dabble in that, and actually journalism is something that I try to pursue seriously, as in like I'm pursuing a career in journalism. Creative nonfiction, which is pretty broad, but I enjoy the stories that are true but don't sound true, and I enjoy telling those. So that's broad, but that, and then also, I would have to also include fiction because I've always wrote little bits of fiction, and it's been a long time, but I've started books and stuff. So I would have to say fiction as well. So those are kind of like a lot of different writings I like
Yeah.
to, yeah, I like to
Yeah,
do.
a little bit of everything. I definitely
Yeah.
consider you someone who writes a little bit of everything. For me, poetry as well. Um, and then what I am trying to turn into my career is writing about more, I guess, nonfiction topics. I mean, it's definitely nonfiction, I guess, but it sounds weird to me to call it nonfiction. But I'm trying to write about science and math and that kind of stuff, more like writing about history and the history and people involved in science and math, I guess. And then also I do a lot of what I call personal first person writing. Like I write about myself a lot. And I guess that's sort of like memoir-y, but
Yeah, and I think
not.
it also falls under like the creative nonfiction umbrella as well.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I think, our writing interests overlap a lot. We've definitely talked about writing and shared ideas about writing a lot in the past, and so this is comfortable ground for us, I think.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And we've had a lot of like personal experience with writing stuff together. Like we've worked on
Mhm.
stuff together, like when we met, one of the ways that we bonded was through a mutual poetry class. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and I remember we always did feedback in that class. You had to get in a group and give feedback to everybody, and I remember one day the instructor of the workshop, Phoebe, was like, you should get with new people. You should get a new group. And we were like, we come as a unit.
Yeah.
It was you and me, and then we
Not a
changed
deal.
to
Yeah.
a group with other people, but we always like to we definitely give and get feedback from each other more than I give and get feedback on my writing from anybody else. I think I ask you
Yeah.
more than I ask other people.
Yeah. Even my sister, because you just have more of a writing eye, I think, than she does. So like if I want like absolute brutal honesty from someone who doesn't do a lot of writing, it would be from my sister. But I think you give like the best, constructive criticism, I would say, because we just like we have that partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so I think that lends itself to us having similar inspirations. But I also don't think that we've ever specifically talked about our writing inspirations
No, I don't think we have.
before. So I'm excited to see what about this is the same for us and what about it is different for us.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I'll just like go ahead and like throw out just start. Um
Yeah.
I I thought about having this topic as a podcast topic. One, because like I mentioned earlier, we've been both kind of, having a little bit of a need for some inspiration. So, hopefully this will serve as that. But then also recently, one of my very favorite writers and someone who I genuinely believe is one of the best writers in the English language of all time, which was Joan Didion, recently passed away, and she was
Yeah.
like 97 or 87 or something like that. Oh, I feel bad, I don't remember. But she lived a long, very, I'm sure, colorful life. And I've actually read a relatively small amount of her writing. I discovered her in college. We were assigned to read one of her essays in a class. And then just ever since we read that essay, I've read a little bit more, and of course I will continue to read more. Um, I just like her writing to me is like perfection, like literary perfection. The way that she structures her sentences, her word choice, her subject matter, she just like and I've read somewhere she said in an interview sometime or something that she was always very purposeful with one, the words that she used, and two, the order that those words were in, which I think is something that I try to do, because I think that, even slightly altering the order of words in a sentence or every individual word can have an impact on how that sentence is perceived, when it's read.
Yeah,
And so, and
absolutely.
you can tell, I mean, to me anyway, when you read her writing, that it's so purposeful. And it's also, if I'm going to be completely honest, a little bit difficult for me to read her writing because she uses a lot of, very big words, and she sounds very smart. But that's actually part of the reason why I enjoy reading her writing, is because
Yeah.
it challenges my brain in good ways, because I feel
Yeah.
like I'm becoming better at reading and writing when I read her writing. And that's what to me is really inspiring about it, is how it makes my brain work, and just how, she got to this place where she was so artful with the way that she wrote. And that, yeah, that inspires me a lot. And my other favorite writer, because I have two favorite writers that I like rank right at the top because they're my favorite
Yeah.
writers for different reasons. My other favorite writer, which is Cameron Crowe, which I guess they both did journalism related writing, so they could both be considered journalists. But
Yeah.
Cameron Crowe is mostly known for writing for music publications, and he
Mm-hmm.
also did movies. I think he like wrote, produced, directed all that stuff. My favorite movie, which is Almost Famous, which when I saw it I didn't know that he wrote that movie.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like loosely based off of his own life experience. He's had the most interesting life. I was to catch up on these two writers. I was reading like their Wikipedia pages yesterday so I can like remember all these things. And Cameron Crowe is a weird one, because I remember reading an article in the Rolling Stone, because he wrote quite a bit for the Rolling Stone. And this is kind of funny maybe, but it was an interview with Harry Styles. And I'm
Oh
not
yeah.
like particularly a huge Harry Styles fan or anything. Like, I don't dislike him, but there was no specific reason for me to have like picked up this magazine and read this article specifically. But I
Yeah.
remember reading it, and it was just so interesting. I thought it was written so unbelievably well. And he did a thing which is my favorite kind of writing to write, which is interview writing. I love
Mm-hmm.
interviewing people and then telling their story. I love that. And he did it in such a genius, beautiful way. And then I figured out it was Cameron Crowe. And then at some point, you know, I also figured out that he like wrote my favorite movie, you know, and like I didn't even know before that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny. I mean, this is not relevant at all, but I also discovered over the past few years that what were they? I like took screenshots of things because it was kind of funny. This is like a little bit of like an off track thing, but it's just kind of funny. The weird ways that like
Go for it.
the world is small. But his
Yep.
first cover story
Mm-hmm.
was on the Allman Brothers Band, who wrote the song that I'm named after, which is just kind
Yeah.
of funny. Just like, you know, just kind of a funny thing.
Yeah.
He was married to Nancy Wilson, one of
Mm-hmm.
the sisters from Heart, who went to Pacific University for a little bit, which was the university that I went to. Just also a funny thing that like
Yes.
is just kind of weird. And then they had twins together, which
Oh,
is also just kind of a weird thing. So
fate
yeah,
or
there's
like
just a lot of like
something.
right, just a lot of like really weird things that don't actually mean anything, but it's like similar to I don't know, or like somehow
Yeah.
related. One of the actresses in Almost Famous plays the lead role in my favorite childhood movie. That I actually didn't know that until like a few months ago, and I figured it out. And I'm like, why is the world so small? Like, how are all
Yeah.
these things? But anyway, yeah. So his writing is always really inspirational, or has been to me for a long time in terms of like specifically the music journalism writing, which is like
Yeah.
what I want to do the
Yeah.
most in terms of writing. Yeah, and so he's had a really interesting, inspiring career in like that field. So is for like specific people and very specific writing, those two are the ones that serve the most inspiration for me reading their writing.
Yeah. For me, I have two sort of answers as well, and they're very different, I think. What immediately comes to mind, and this will be like no surprise to you, but is Chuck Klosterman. Or I know that
Oh
it's
yeah.
Klosterman and I cannot like change it in my head. Um anyways, I think that Chuck has been the biggest inspiration on my writing voice of any like one specific author, you know. um I like the voice that I've developed when I write about other people and historical things, and even when I talk about myself, I think is very reminiscent of Chuck's writing. You know, like I didn't even realize that at first when I very first started reading his work. But I really didn't start writing for myself. I wrote poetry before. Um, I had read his books, but I hadn't started writing like long form stuff really until after I had already started reading his books. And just from the very beginning, anything, I mean, I don't know, but I think pretty much anything that I've written that's kind of long form like that has had distinct inspiration from Chuck Klosterman. Um, and it's interesting because yeah, he writes about himself, which I also do, but he mostly writes about music and pop culture, which is not what I usually write about. Sometimes, but usually that's not what I'm writing about. Usually I'm writing about like math and science and myself.
Yeah.
um, but I there's just something about the way that he's able to communicate exactly what you need to know, and in such an entertaining way and with such a distinct voice that I'm trying to have also a distinct voice. Not the same voice as Chuck, but
Yeah,
also
yeah.
a distinct voice.
Yeah, your own unique but clear like personality coming across. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I learned a lot about how to, because when I heard him speak for the first time, I had read a lot of his books before the first time that I heard him speak, and he speaks exactly the way he writes. And I since I've like made that connection and understood that like when I read his writing I can hear his voice even before I actually heard him speak in real life. That's what I've been trying to do with my writing. And so I think, you know, his writing definitely inspires my writing when I write, long form stuff. But I didn't exactly realize how much his writing inspired me until last year in like April. I was doing a really big writing project, and I reread his book, his first book that I ever read, which is called Killing Yourself to Live. And I reread it for only the second time, and I immediately was able to write the thing that I wanted to write. I was immediately able to understand what voice I needed to have. I was immediately able to understand like what details were engaging and important. And yeah, I don't know. That book specifically is something that like inspires my writing a lot. Like I think that book is such a good use of voice. I don't know how else to say it because I wasn't an English major. But,
No, that's good.
you know, yeah. So that's one of my writing inspirations. The other one is a poetry inspiration, and that is Olivia Gowood is a poet that I have read since her first book came out. And even before that, when she was just like posting videos of her like saying her poems out loud on like YouTube and stuff. And I think her voice is really interesting because she writes poetry in I don't know if it's necessarily a unique way, but she definitely has her own style as a poet, and she also has shown me a lot of things for the first time, mostly because she was one of the first poets that I ever, started reading and listening to. And so to me, she's a really big inspiration because it was through her poetry that I saw a lot of poetic things for the first time, and then I also think that she has a really unique perspective on how to write about being a woman, which a lot of my poetry, I think, is somewhat related to being a woman. And so I think I draw a lot of inspiration from her as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, those are our writer inspirations, I guess. And then
Yeah, like directly writing related.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
but of
don't
course. Oh, sorry.
oh I don't really write music. But I
Oh,
think
yeah.
that musicians do play a big role in inspiring me. I listen to music absolutely constantly, and
Yeah.
I definitely have you know I sorry, I'm like
That's
trying to
okay.
formulate um what I want to say is that whenever I need to feel a certain way, to like I have some vague idea or something that I want to write about, but I need to like get into that emotion, that's where music comes in for me. And so if I'm trying to write something sad, I'm gonna listen to the Wonder Years and I'm gonna feel sad and then I'm gonna
Yeah.
write about it,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially you and I are both like that in different ways. We dabble in multiple mediums of art. And so like definitely for me too, other art forms like uh what's the word that I'm trying to think of? Like I know that I hold on. Let me find the word in here. Um like consuming other arts can be inspiring, can inspire you to like create a different kind of art. Like
Sure. Yeah.
I think that for me a lot what happens is I'll like listen to music and then draw, or like I'll be listening to
Mm-hmm.
music and I'll be inspired to like draw something. So there will be like other, that will like
Yeah.
contribute to inspirations for other things that aren't necessarily like I don't have to just like read a writing to be inspired to write. Like sometimes, it's like a writing inspires a song, or a song inspires, a drawing, or something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to maybe like talk about do you have any specific memories of something that like triggered inspiration that you remember more specifically about like what exactly it was and what exactly it inspired. I'll go first. You have time to like think a
go
little
ahead.
bit.
Yeah.
But I mean I know that you know of this poem because it's one of my favorite poems I've ever written, and I also like talk about it a lot. And it's from a long time ago, but it's my poem called Some Mathematical Love Poetry. And it's like one of the and you know the backstory of this, but I'll just like fill everybody else but like I used to have this thing on my blog called Sexual Math Poem Friday.
Oh, used to. It's retired officially.
Oh, I don't know, maybe
I mean,
not.
yeah,
But
I guess you haven't done one in a long time, but yeah.
yeah, well, Tumblr's all like not about
Oh,
that anymore.
yeah, very extra anti anything now.
Yeah. Also, I'm like trying to be more of like a professional person now, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyways, I used to have this thing on my blog called Sexual Math Poem Friday, and this started as a trend after we already talked about the poetry class that we like part of our friendship formed in. And in that class we had this prompt to like write a poem, and it had like all these rules. It was like you have to like you have to like have a line break in the middle of a sentence. You have to like do this. There was like all these different things that you should like include in your poem. And can you hear the train?
I did hear the train. Yeah. I don't know if it'll. Well, I guess it will pick up because I heard it.
Oh my god.
That's okay.
Okay. Anyways. So anyways, there was this poem prompt with all these rules, and it was like the first week of class. It was like the first poem that we had to write, and I had written like a little bit of poetry before that, but not really, and I really didn't know what to write about. And so I was like looking for inspiration pretty heavily, and you and I kind of knew each other, but we weren't like sharing our writing with each other yet, you know, because this was like the first poem, so we like didn't even know to do that yet. And so I kind of didn't know who to ask, and I kind of didn't know what to do, and I hadn't really thought through all of these like inspiration things, so I didn't have any of the inspiration things already like set up for me to like go through. And
just keep going, it's okay.
Oh my god.
The train is our special guest today.
Yeah. So anyways, so I didn't know what to do. I remember I sat down in my room in England, and I opened my laptop and I turned on music. I don't remember what music I turned on, but I turned some kind of music on, and I decided, okay, I'll just write about something I know, which is math. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna write some stuff about math. And then I was like, this is a boring poem because it's like really stupid. It's like literally just like I don't know, like math or something. So I was like, okay, it needs to be spicier. And so then I was like, spicier.
What's spicy?
Yeah, sex is spicy. So we'll add that in there too. And I literally, because it was supposed to like be this like mismatched kind of poem, right? I had this idea that like I would switch in between like the most sexy thing, which is sex, and the least sexy thing, which is math. And like,
was that the one where part of the prompt was to use bits from a book, and you used like a math textbook? Yeah.
That's a different poem.
Oh, that was a different poem? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I ended up doing that, and that that prompt and that like being stuckness, I guess, led me to come up with one of my best ideas to date, which was mixing sex and math into poetry. Because that's really carried me for like 5 years now.
And it's very unique. And didn't you actually find someone else who did that? Which is incredible. Like
kind of, yeah. So like I started posting all of these on Tumblr. Like I said, I would like post them every every Friday on my blog.
Yeah.
And I did that like through our whole poetry class. Like we had to do like a portfolio thing at the end. And it had to have some kind of theme or like some kind of, I don't know, something. So I it made Phoebe read all of my sexy math poems. And she liked them a lot. Phoebe loved it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of ran with that, and I started writing more, and I posted them on Tumblr and stuff. And I actually like gained a lot of followers from that, and like people kind of got into it and like were really, you know, responding well to that. And then it reached, you know, somebody else who actually let me know that they wrote one because they saw some of mine.
That's incredible. You inspired someone else.
Yeah, so it really like, you know, went full circle.
Yeah.
And then like just this year, so I alluded to the big writing project that I was doing in April, which was Math Poetry Month, which you were a part of. And I'm revamping it for this year too. Like it's going to be a tradition.
Awesome.
But anyways, yeah, so when I started doing like a bunch of research for that, because I wanted to write a lot about that and write more math poetry for that and stuff, I found that you know, sexy math poems were not my invention. Unfortunately. Other people have thought of that before, and even as far back as you know, in like the 1700s, they were writing sexy math poems.
Oh yeah, you did find that's just it's kind of incredible though.
Yeah. Anyways, that was kind of a tangent, but anyways,
that's okay.
Yeah, so that was like my like biggest like immediate inspiration was and it was in the role of being stuck and being like, well, whatever, I'll just like write like 2 different poems basically and like combine them. And I guess that like is how I want to segue into talking about prompts, because
yeah.
Like
I don't know if I have a story. I don't know. We're just gonna skip because that's what you're talking about was specific memories.
Oh yeah.
But we can skip me. That's okay.
No,
I don't know if I have any. Like I mean, sorry. I don't know if I really have. I mean, the closest thing I can think of is I have a short horror story that I actually wrote when I was in high school, and I like edited it and added to it for I took a fiction class in college, and I like found that on like my old hard drive and was like, what if I made this but different and better? And it was a horror story actually based on a nightmare that I had when I was in high school. And it's very loosely like I don't remember what happened in the nightmare. It was pretty much just a specific like humanoid creature or something that was in this dream that like inspired that. So that's like immediately what I could think of. But I think I have a lot of very random moments. I have like notes on my phone or any random thing in the day, like a thought or anything could kind of trigger like a little bit of like potential poetry or prompt, you know, for any type of writing. And I like write it in my phone. So I've had moments like that. I have had moments that have immediately inspired like poetry specifically.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Especially like, I mean, you know, it's like sappy, but like some like love poems have been, you know, like kind of immediately inspired from moments, you know, like you like get home after a really cute date or something and you're like, I'm feeling poetic. Yeah, like that, like that kind of stuff. Yeah, but I mean, I also mentioned prompts, so we could, you know, we can we can
also segue into prompts.
I think it's a similar.
I think, you know, prompts can be useful to create inspiration sometimes. For me, like sometimes I need that, and like I said, you know, I think one of my best ideas ever has come from being like stuck on a prompt, you know. But other times it can be like the hugest roadblock for me. Like sometimes I really need to just like write whatever I need to write, you know?
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I do like prompts, and so I'm always trying to find ways to like prompt myself, I guess.
Yeah.
And if I can like talk about my Math Poetry Month project one more time in this podcast. When I part of it, which was the part that you participated in, was asking everybody to write a math poem. Didn't have to be sexy, just a math poem. And I asked, you know, everyone who participated questions at the end. And one of the things that everybody said was that they really appreciated like having somebody like ask them to write something, because it like inspired them to write something. I know you said that, I know Luke said that, and I don't think Nathan said that, but we'll pretend that he did.
Yeah.
He probably
pressure
felt it deep down.
can be a good inspiring factor.
Yeah. And so I do think, people appreciate prompts, and I appreciate them. I try to make them for myself sometimes, and
Yeah. I generally appreciate them almost 100% of the time, even if it's something simple like for poetry specifically. I think about when we used to get prompts, like in our class, and sometimes it was a topic and sometimes it was like a poem like structure, like a specific type of poem. And usually it's good for me to have at least one of those things like predetermined or pre-decided to flesh out the rest of it. Like as long as I have a format and or a topic, like that's super helpful for me. It's really hard for me to just like sit down and pull something out of thin air. It's usually really helpful for me to have like something to start with, some sort of prompt. Yeah.
I agree, although I usually my poetry and my long form writing starts from nothing. Like usually when I do write, I don't have that, although I do find it helpful when I do. But usually my poetry does not have a form, and it does not have like a specific topic, although I have written a lot that have very similar themes, but I think that's just like true. Like, I mean, of course you're just gonna write about similar things,
things that you like to write about, because it's part of your life. And
I have written a lot that are like, when I used to do sexual math poem Friday, it was like, I would write poems with the purpose of like posting them for that, but for the most part I tend to write from scratch, and sometimes I don't know if it's going to be a piece of writing or if it's going to be a poem or if it's going to be like, I don't
sometimes you're just like, I have this thought and it needs to be in words somehow.
But yeah, I guess what I want to end on, and maybe we'll kind of wrap up with this. I don't know how long we've been going, but my voice is getting a little bit tired.
Okay.
But what I want to wrap up on is like how to kind of keep yourself inspired sort of passively. And for me, this is like I really need to be constantly reading something. I need to be constantly listening to music. And it's not I need to be reading something specific. Like this isn't the author that always inspires me. It's like I need to be reading a lot of things all the time to get new like literary ideas in my head, and I need to be listening to music all the time so that I get more of those ideas in my head, and different moods in my head and like that kind of thing. And that's how I think I passively inspire myself. Like
definitely, me too. I think that some of my best writing has been done when I am in active reading periods. When I'm actively reading other people's writing, then my brain, is like in that mode to produce, writing. And so actively actively consuming whatever like media or like whatever that you also like to create or like to be a part of, like go out and consume other people's art of the same form. And I think that's a really good way to inspire yourself to create, is to like support other people's creations too.
Absolutely.
I know that like it's kind of funny. I'll just like include this. I feel like also specifically watching like documentaries about artists, or like I know it's happened to me a lot with music specifically in my life. You'll watch like those tour videos, like behind the scenes type documentaries, and there's something about like watching other people's process and then the like culmination of that process that's really inspiring, for like myself. So yeah, just kind of
Yeah.
constantly listening to music, reading, writing, like what, other, just keeps you in that mood to keep
Yeah.
creating. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
I think those
Well,
are the big thoughts, and we can give
yeah.
your voice a break now.
Sounds
Yeah.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is a good one.
Yeah.
So yeah, until next time, I love you,
I love you too.
and we'll talk next time.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.